More and more children are out of school, but parents don't want math learning to stop. They're turning to Mathnasium at Home, real-time math instruction tailored to your child's exact educational needs. It's the same face-to-face live instruction used in our centers for over 15 years, now on a computer. Your child can keep their math skills sharp, catch up, or soar ahead, from home or anywhere with an internet connection. To learn if Mathnasium at Home is right for your child, visit mathnasium.com/at-home. Mathnasium at Home, changing lives through math.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Mathnasium Schoolhouse. I am John, the AVP of Education and Training for Mathnasium. And so we have another Math Magic session planned for today. And if you were with me on my previous Math Magic session, and you can, if you weren't, you could certainly look in our video library here on Facebook and you'll be able to find it. But if you were with me on that one, you and I both know I totally was able to read your mind. And I'm happy that you joined me again so I can show you another kind of cool little, trick, kind of magic thing that you should be able to show a friend or practice on your own. And it's actually really cool. And all you really need to be able to do in order to kind of do this trick is add, which is cool because, sometimes math tricks are complicated or, they're really hard to figure out. But this one, if you can add, you're okay. Now, we're going to add a bunch of numbers together and they're going to get pretty big. But I'll make sure that I give you a little time to work it out and you can figure it out. So we'll talk about how you can do this at home and what you might need in order to do that. It's a little bit different if I were with you in person instead of being through a computer, but we'll talk in a little bit later on just kind of what you need and how you would trick somebody else and show them what you kind of a cool little math thing and all of that. When you come to Mathnasium, we certainly, put together a really awesome plan for things that you need to work on and practice. Some of you may be getting back in school and that. And then we also just like to have fun and explore interesting things in math, kind of like what we're doing today. And, math is just a really interesting subject, and I hope you have a lot of fun with it and enjoy it. You're all really smart, and I always appreciate all of your hard work on all these videos that we do together. So with all of that said, let's get started. And in order for me to help prove to you that this hasn't been set up and I don't already know the answers to these things in advance, I do have this orange piece of paper, and I'll show you what I'm going to use that for in a moment. So here it is. Okay, it's got the date on it. Now, I also, and we can talk about some of the other ways to do this later, but I also have a deck of Mathnasium playing cards. So if you're a Mathnasium student, you probably use these in the center. If you're not, then you need to definitely stop by your local Mathnasium and check them out. And when you sign up, you'll be able to earn one of these, which is really cool. And you can use a regular deck of cards for this. You don't have to have a Mathnasium deck. A Mathnasium deck is actually special for a lot of different reasons, but a regular deck of cards will work if you want to do this trick in this way. Okay, and this is a shuffle deck. I promise you, I haven't rigged the deck at all. I'll shuffle it a couple times just so you know that I'm not going to pick the cards that I want in order for this to work out the way that I would want it to. Okay. So you can, if you're going to do this trick with a family member, you can shuffle it a few times. You can see the deck is here. I can't see the numbers. It doesn't matter. I'm going to take some cards and just throw them away so you can see. I'm going to pick two cards. Okay, I'm just going to pick these two. And I have a 7 and a 7, which is actually kind of interesting. Okay. Now, what I want you to do on your paper, and what I'm going to do here on the whiteboard, is I'm going to start with the 7 and the 7. And we're going to add. Okay, and what I want you to do is, so I'm going to add 7 and 7, and I want you to come up with a list of 10 numbers. Okay, And each number in this list is going to be, I'm going to take the pair and I'm going to add it to the previous. So 7 plus 7. And then I want to add 7 and 14, gives me 21. I want to add 14 and 21, which gives me 35, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's what I want you to do on your paper. So take each number and add that number to the one that came before it, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. Okay, so next one. And you see how these numbers get big pretty fast. Okay. And then when you get to the end, I want you to take and add all of these up. Okay. Here's my piece of paper here. Okay. And I've written the answer on this paper, and while you're adding these up and figuring out what the sum of all those numbers are, I've already written it down, and you can see I'm going to keep it right here so that I'm not cheating. Okay. And I'm going to give you just a moment to take and add all those. There's 10 numbers there. It's going to take you a moment. And remember, I want to add these up. And remember where, I'm going to keep this up so that you don't think I'm going to write it somewhere else. Remember where these came from. I drew a 7 and a 7. I added those together to get 14. Then I added 7 and 14 to get 21, 14 and 21 to get 35, 21 and 35 to get 56, 35 and 56 to get 91, and so on and so forth. If you've added them up, hopefully you didn't use a calculator, although you could. I would prefer that you didn't. I would prefer that you added all those up. But it's 1,001. Now, that's a lot of numbers to add up quickly. But I was able, when I wrote down the last number, I was able to write and figure it out very quickly. And that's where the trick comes in. And it didn't matter which two numbers I picked from the beginning. That I knew what the sum of all those numbers was going to be, and I didn't have to add them all up, which is really cool. And it doesn't matter which two numbers you start with. It will always work out this way. Okay. Now, let's talk about how this works. Okay, and there's actually a really cool mathematical reason behind how this works. And when we do these things, it's always important to, whenever possible, to see how these certain math tricks work, right? Sometimes somebody will show you a math trick, and tricks are fun and they help you, but when you become a really great math student, you want to definitely know all the math behind something that you've just learned. And this actually has a really cool explanation behind it, and something that's worth exploring. Okay, so let's take a closer look. And just to prove, and we'll do this more slowly this time. Okay, just to prove, I'm shuffling the cards again. Okay, same thing. Cards are here. I'm just going to take and pick a random one. It doesn't matter. Random. I'm going to pick 2 cards. So 6 and 4. That's what I'm going to start with. Erase this. Start with 6 and 4. And I want you to do the same thing on your paper again, okay? So I want to take the two numbers that I drew at random, and I want to add them together, and I get 10. And I want you to keep repeating that over and over and over again until you have 10 numbers. So we'll do this slowly. So the next one will be 14 because I want to add 4 and 10. Okay. The next one will be 24. $38. And some of these get tricky. So remember, if you've been joining me for the mental math ones, try to do these mentally if you can. 38 is really close to 40. 24 plus 40 is 64, but you need to take 2 away because 40 was too much. So get 62. This works out kind of cool because 38 and 62, when you add them together, you get 100, which is cool. Then that makes the next one pretty easy, hopefully. 100 plus 62 is 162. That, I believe, gives me 9. I need one more. I get 262. The goal is to add all of those up. But I already know, before you do that the answer to this is going to be 682. And that was pretty quick, right? And that's where the trick comes in. So if you were going to do this at home and if you want to practice this, I think it's really good practice because it's good for your addition. And if you've been watching the mental math sessions we've been doing, we've been practicing ways to be able to add these numbers together in our head pretty quickly, which is cool. So how does this work? And if I were going to do this at home, you can use cards, which is interesting because you can shuffle them and have somebody pick 2 cards and write them down, and you can have that person do the addition, or you can do it yourself, like I'm doing. But the key when you're doing this, and what you always have to find, there's 2 ways to look at this. Okay? It's either the 7th number, sorry, let's write it this way. It's the 7th number in my list, or it's the 4th up from the bottom. Either way. So either I look at it like it's the 7th number that I found, or I count up 4 from the bottom. Once you find this number, you already know what this is going to be. Okay? So if you're having somebody else do it, once they write that 7th number down, then the only thing you need to be able to do quickly is multiply that number times 11. This here, this sum will always be that 7th number times 11. Always. Okay? And there's a mathematical reason behind that. So it doesn't matter what 2 numbers I start with. You could start with 0 and 0, but that's not very interesting. You can even start with 2 negative numbers, and this works. You can start with a negative number and a positive number. If you've been learning those in school, you can start with those. You can start with 2 numbers that are the same, like I did with the first example. Remember, when I drew those, I thought that was interesting because it works whether the numbers are the same or if they're different. And it actually works with any 2 numbers. So we can start with 3-digit numbers and this will work. But if you're going to do this trick, it's best to keep the numbers small, especially if you're just kind of learning addition and you want to do the addition yourself, or if you're working with a parent, because these numbers, they get big fast. So if I chose 2 3-digit numbers, then these numbers, as I add them up, will get really big really fast. And then what I have to multiply times 11 will also be a very big number. Okay. Now, and those are all things to keep in mind, but you don't have to use cards either. You can just ask a family member or a friend, pick two numbers less than 10, and that's how you can start. Okay. All things to keep in mind if you want to do this, but it always works this way. Okay. Now the question is why. All right. Now I'm going to ask you, if you were with me, I did a previous session on something, and we were talking about a special sequence of numbers. Does anybody remember what that was called? Or do you know? You can type it in the comments if you'd like. Or if you were with me on that previous session, you would know because we worked on this together. So this here is called a Fibonacci sequence. Okay. And I did a whole lesson on all it's not all, I mean, we could do 10 lessons, if not more, on all the really cool things that happen with the Fibonacci numbers and Fibonacci sequences. But I would check that one out because we get into what that is, and you already know, hopefully, where those numbers come from, because the way we did it just a moment ago, that's where these numbers come from. I take each number and I add the number that comes before it. Okay, so 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5, and so on and so forth. And I can keep doing that forever as long as I want to. Okay. Now, you may be saying, that's the one that we just did. You may be saying that, well, the Fibonacci sequence starts with 1 and 1. We started with 6 and 4. That's not the same, but it doesn't matter. Okay. We can create these kind of sequences that are like the Fibonacci sequence that follow the same rule, and we don't have to start with 1 and 1 or 0 and 1. We can start with 6 and 4 or 7 and 7 or 525 and 8. It doesn't matter. I can create these by adding all of these pairs. Okay, now I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and this hopefully doesn't get too strange, but I'm going to show you how this works and why you always take that 7th number and multiply it times 11. So when you come to Mathnasium, we talk a lot about apples and bananas. If you're a Mathnasium student, we have apples and we have bananas, and you know what those are even if you're not a Mathnasium student, but we also have this concept of a banapple. And we know there's no such thing. If I have an apple and a banana, and I want to take those two things and add them together, I really can't unless I change the name. Okay? If I have an apple and a banana and I want to add them together, I can if I want to call them both fruits, and I have two fruits. Okay? So when you come to Mathnasium, you can learn all about banapples and how that helps you with a bunch of different things, and it's kind of funny to think about a banapple and what that would look like if it was mixed together. Okay? Actually, it's really cool in our home office of Mathnasium here in Los Angeles. We actually have rooms that, well, one of them is shaped like an apple and the other one looks like a banana. So it's kind of cool. It's a big thing for us. Okay. But the understanding of what I'm about to do next is basically centers around, I can't take an apple and a banana and combine them together. And actually, we're kind of touching on algebra just a little bit, but I think you'll be able to follow it. And if it's hard, you can always go back and watch later. Okay. So let's say I had an apple and a banana. Okay. I'm going to write these the exact same way that I was writing the numbers before. So I'm going to start stacking them up the same way. Okay, but instead of a 6 and a 4, I have an apple and a banana. And I use two different names because those numbers that I started with, they could be different, like 6 and 4. Now, we just talked about if I have an apple and I have a banana and I want to take and add those together, and I want to call them apple and banana, I'm not going to change the name here. If I want to add them together, then I say I have an apple plus a banana. And whether you realize it or not, we're actually kind of doing algebra. And if you're young, like, you can tell everybody that we're kind of doing algebra here a little bit. Okay. Now, think about how we created every number in this list. I'm going to use a different color here. I know I got a lot going on, but we took each number and added it to the one that came before it. So each number in my list, I added to the one that came before it, and that's how I figure out what went there. So I want to do the exact same thing here. Okay. So I have a banana and an apple and a banana. And if I want to add those together, so you have a banana, and over here in this hand you have an apple and a banana, and I want to add those together. What do I have now? I still only have one apple, but now I have two bananas. Okay. I'm going to erase this. So remember, I want to add those together now. Okay, so think about it in terms of apples and bananas again. I have an apple, and I want to add another apple to it, so how many apples do I have now? I have two apples. And I have a banana and two more bananas, so how many bananas do I have now? I have three. Now, if you want to, and you haven't already, keep going. So now I want you to take those and add them together. Right. Make it a little bit more clear. That one and that one. And the question is, when do I want you to stop? I want you to stop when you hit 10. Remember, we were looking for 10 numbers. Right now we have 5. We need 10. If you want to keep going, you can. So I have an apple, and I want to add 2 more apples. So now I have 3 apples. And, here's the thing, and it's not a mystery. I'm actually just going to write that as an A. An A means apple. Okay. Because you don't want to have to keep writing apples over and over and over again. I told you we were doing algebra a little bit. So when you see letters in math, you can start thinking about what they mean. Well, in this case, A just means apple. That's how many apples I have. Okay. Now, I have 2 bananas. I want to add 3 more bananas to that. I now have 5. I'm going to write that with a B. B means banana. Okay. I'm going to write it short now. So next, 2 apples plus 3 apples is 5. 3 bananas plus 5 bananas is 8 bananas. Okay, so now I have 7. I need 3 more. 3 apples plus 5 apples is 8 apples. 5 bananas plus 8 bananas is 13. 5 apples plus 8 apples is 13 apples. 8 bananas plus 13 bananas is 21. I only need 1 more. I have 21 apples and 34 bananas. That should be 10. Now remember what I asked you to do from there. Like, once you had your list of 10 numbers, you could have started with any 2. I asked you to add them up. So the exact same way, I want to add all of my apples together. So I have 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples, 5 apples, 8 apples, 13 apples, 21 apples, 34 apples, 55 apples. I'm going to add all my bananas. I have a banana, 2 bananas, 4 bananas, 7, 12, 20, 33, 54, 88. Now remember that when I was adding all of these up, the important number was the 7th. And what do you see here? What's 5 times 11? And what's 8 times 11? And that's the reason why when you want to add all of these numbers together, I take the 7th and multiply times 11, and it always works. It doesn't matter what I choose to start. It will always work. So here's some stuff for you to practice. One, I want you to try this trick and practice it a bunch of times before you do it with someone else. Practice the addition, practice picking any 2 numbers, and practice multiplying that number. Let's go back to the number example. That number by 11, whatever it may be. Now, what's an easy way to multiply something by 11? If you've been joining me on the mental math sessions, you know that when we multiply things by 11, we often will multiply times 10 first and then add 1 more. So if I want to multiply 62 times 11 quickly, I multiply 62 times 10, and I want to add 1 more 62. And that's how I'm able to figure that out quickly. Okay. That's a really great math way to think about multiplying times 11. There are other tricks for multiplying by 11, but I like this one because it helps you practice your mental math. There are tricks. This one helps you with your actual multiplication facts. Okay? So you need to practice that. Now, you can also practice what would happen if you started with 2 of the same number. So let's say this was an apple and an apple. That'd be like my example when I had 7 and 7. And practice that and see how it changes. It doesn't change how you would find the answer. You would still multiply that 7th one by 11, but you don't have any bananas now. Okay? You have just a bunch of apples. And that might even be a little bit easier to figure out. Okay? Now I'm going to show you one more cool thing real quick as you're practicing. I'm going to erase some of this because it's getting messy. When you're calculating this, if you find the 12th number in this list, okay? So let's say I wanted to keep this going. So if the 10th number is 262, then the 11th number is going to be 262 plus the number that came before it, which is 424. And the 12th number is going to be these put together, so 686. That's the 12th. So let's say multiplying times 11 is really hard for you. And for some of you, if you haven't been practicing multiplication, or 62 times 11 is really hard, this always works too. This number that we found is always the 12th number minus the second. Always. So if you have somebody find the first 10, if you can find the 11th and the 12th and subtract the second number, it will always be equal to the sum of those first 10. And that's something else for you to practice when you're at home. Okay? So there you go. I hope you learned a fun new math trick. Oh, I failed to mention one other thing, and I hope you noticed. This was something I really wanted to talk about. What do you notice about all of these numbers? I cannot believe I failed to mention that. Remember that list of numbers that we had before? It shouldn't be a surprise. They're all the same. It's related to the Fibonacci sequence in that way. So I hope you learned a cool new math trick. I hope you practice it. I hope you try it on somebody else. And I hope you learned something today. Mathnasium Schoolhouse is always here every day at 11 a.m. Pacific. I will be back next Wednesday to talk more about mental math stuff. I have some cool things planned for you next week to really stretch your brain out, as always. And we will be back tomorrow with another fun lesson if you want to join us then. Thank you so much. Stay safe out there. Bye now.
It's afternoons that seem to be the most hectic for us, so it was much more convenient when we found Mathnasium at home.
All right, so how do we do half of 5? I think one of the best things about at home is that it really feels like you're almost at home with the student in their house teaching them.
I'm in my comfort zone.
You can just ask for help and the instructor will come right to you.
With Mathnasium at home, I know that they're getting the help that they need.
Awesome, great job.
Mathnasium, changing lives through math.